Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are going back to the basics, and for this reason we are going to solve an Algorithms 101 problem. It's called valid parentheses and it's the question number 20 on LeetCode. Without further ado, let's move to the board, guys. Alright, as you can see, that's the question called valid parentheses, and the question states, given a string s containing just these characters, so brackets characters, determine if the input string is valid. And for the input string to be valid, it has to fulfill these two conditions. So the first one states that it must, so the brackets must be closed by the same time of brackets, and the second one is open brackets must be closed in the correct order. So a square bracket should close with a square bracket, and at the same time they have to be in order. For example, something like square bracket and parentheses, closing square bracket and closing parentheses, that's not valid. Okay, so I have created a few test cases down there for you guys. As we can see, the first test case is it will actually return true because it fulfills both scenarios. And for the test case number 2, let me just grab that thing. Yep. Alright, for the test case number 2, we have opening and closing curly brackets. It fulfills both scenarios, and that's true as well. However, if we can see the test case number 3, we've got opening curly brackets and closing square brackets. And that, of course, doesn't fulfill any scenario. So we are going to return false. I guess now you are thinking, how can we implement that algorithmically? And I can think two solutions. The first one is not good, the second one is great. So for the first one, what we can do is we can keep in memory the first element of a string, and after that iterate through the rest of the string and do the correct comparisons that we need to do. And for the second iteration, we move that pointer one position to the right, so here, and we need to go through all the string again. Of course, that's not time efficient, so we should consider that implementation. And a really neat way to solve that question is with a hash map and a storage array. I know that some people solve that question with a stack. However, I'm not going to create a class stack in order to avoid more complicated things, and I'm just going to use a classic array for that. Cool. So what do I mean firstly by hash map? So for our hash map, we are going to have just 3 elements. The open parentheses, the open square bracket, and the open curly bracket. And that one is going to point to the closing equivalent. Sorry folks, that's just an arrow. And the last bit, closing curly bracket. Cool. And we're going to have our storage here, which is going to be just an array. Sweet. Let me grab the orange one. I love orange. Okay, so now how are we going to solve it with these two data structures that we have just created? So what we need to do is we are going to loop over the input string, and we're going to check whether the current element resides in the hash map. And as we can see here, the only elements that reside in a hash map are the open brackets. Okay, so if that element resides in the hash map, then we are going to push that element at the end of that array. And because we are in the first element, we are going to just push it here. That's a string, right? Yep. All right. So now we are moving to the second element of that string. And what are we going to do? The same thing. We need to check if that element is in the hash map. And as you can see here, the closing parenthesis is not present as a key of that map. So what we need to do is we need to consider an else block which will catch that situation. Alright, so for that else block, what I'm going to check is whether the current element of the string is equal or not to the last appended element has mapped that. Because as we can see up here, open brackets must be closed in the correct order. So because the current element is not part in the hash map, that means that it will definitely be a closing bracket, as the string has only bracket elements in it. Alright, so now that we are clear about that, how are we going to do that algorithmically? I'm going to say hash map of the storage. I'm going to just write st, I think it's clear, of the storage dot pop, let's say, because we're using JavaScript. So I'm going to pop the last element and hash map it, and I'm going to check whether whatever the map returns is actually not equal to our current element. Yeah, and we need to check if these are not equal, and if they are not equal, we just return false, because we don't have a valid string. Cool. Sorry if I have confused you guys. What we are going to do is move to the LeetCode website and start typing the algorithm. So as we said, we are going to create a hash map here of brackets. So let's start with parentheses. Okay, I went for curly bracket. Alright, parentheses and square brackets. Sweet. Now that we have our hash map, we need to create our storage. I'm going to use the let here because the storage will change. And I'm going to initialize it with an empty array. Sweet. Now we're going to loop over the given string, so I'm going to use the classic for loop for that. I know it's not too JavaScripty, but it will do the job. And sweet. Now we have to check whether the current element of the string resides in the hash map, and in order to do that, we are going to use the in operator. And if it does, I'm going to push that element at the end of the array. Otherwise, here I'm going to have an else block. And as we said, we are going to check whether the current element is not equal to the storage dot pop. However, we need to hash map that in order to get the correct one. Sweet. And if these two are not equal, then that's not a valid one. So I'm going to return false. Alright. And now is the situation where we need to return true. And in order to return true, what we need to have is an empty storage. So return storage length is equal to 0. Run. Sweet. Let's submit it. Perfect. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for watching the video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do that, and catch you in the next one. Cheers.